you. I'm speaking on behalf today for my colleague, Brent Gonzalez, who unfortunately could not make it. So as Anne mentioned, I'm ED of the International Network of People Who Use Drugs, a peer-based global network working to promote the health and defend the human rights of people who use drugs. I would like to thank the chair, the co-organisers of the session and the CND for the opportunity for us to express our voice here. We know that drug policies cannot continue to be debated and developed without the meaningful participation of those most directly impacted by drug policies, that is, people who use drugs. The outcome document, ratified by member states, reaffirms a commitment to, I quote, comprehensive, far-reaching and people-centred set of universal and transformative goals and targets. These are embodied in the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, signalling an unprecedented shift towards ensuring that public health, development and human rights are prioritised and become central to all policy development. We celebrate the commitment in paragraph 4 to work towards drug policies that respect human rights, fundamental freedoms and the inherent dignity of all individuals, including people who use drugs who are negatively impacted by the current criminalising and stigmatising paradigm. The international community should recognise that existing punitive drug policies, they fuel violence and unrest, threaten democracies, welfare and well-being for all. Going forward, drug policies should instead seek to reduce violence, strengthen governance, strengthen community systems, the rule of law, and promote the well-being of society at large and those who are most marginalised and vulnerable, that is, those who are left behind. If we truly now are preparing to take stock of progress made and implement global drug policy for the next decade, we need to stop harmful policies that rely on prohibition through criminalisation. Continuing the war of drugs means a continuation of militarization, along with armed confrontation and disproportionate spending on security, enforcement and supply reduction strategies. These not only fail to achieve their goals, but are also at the expense of establishing and promoting peaceful and just communities and societies. The war on drugs and its drug-free objectives actively undermine the SDG agenda, which is determined to foster peaceful, just and inclusive societies which are free from fear and violence, so that all human beings can fulfill their potential in dignity and equality and in a healthy environment. In other words, and I quote, there can be no sustainable development without peace, and no peace without sustainable development. Drug-free objectives are not only unrealistic, they are dangerous and harmful, used to justify widespread human rights violations, and an overly punitive approach that directly undermines health, development, peace and security. It is people who use drugs that are most directly and severely impacted, as drug-free objectives contradict and interfere with the rights of autonomy, self-determination and the free development of the individual. Further, the SDG's principle on partnership tells us that further steps should be based on a spirit of strengthened global solidarity, focused in particular on the needs of the poorest and most vulnerable, and with the participation of all countries, all stakeholders and all people. Paragraph 8 of the Declaration of the 2030 Agenda reads, "We envision a world of universal respect for human rights and human dignity, the rule of law, justice, equality and non-discrimination, of respect for race, ethnicity and cultural diversity, and of equal opportunity, permitting the full realization of human potential and contributing to shared prosperity. This should be used to guide decision-making and drug policy development." Right now, our communities are still subject to actions that directly undermine progress towards human rights, which include compulsory drug detention that uses torture and enforced and unpaid labour, the death penalty, open promotion of violence directly targeting and specifically targeting people who use drugs, an epidemic of preventable drug overdose deaths that grow each year, extreme examples of the harmful impacts of current policies include state-sanctioned extrajudicial killings of people who use drugs in numerous contexts, adding to the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives in the last 2 years alone. This needless loss of lives continues unabated and has led to widespread murder and disappearances amongst citizens, including youth, women and Indigenous communities. To conclude, drug policy must align with the human rights treaties and obligations. The loss of life and atrocities committed in the name of the war on drugs must end. As people who use drugs, we promote the incorporation of the full spectrum of harm reduction strategies, policies and practices, such as needle syringe programs, OST, substance analysis services, harm reduction for non-injecting users, for stimulants, and for supply-side harm reduction. We, as the voice of people who use drugs all over the world, strongly affirm that the post-2019 strategy should focus on human rights, that is, on inclusion, participation, and community involvement. Drug policy should not continue to be encapsulated in a parallel universe that is isolated from the broader governance agenda. In this sense, we also welcome the launch of the University of Essex UNDP World's First Guidelines on Human Rights and Drug Policy. People who use drugs are an integral part of the world. We are citizens, we are human beings, and we are community. Thank you.